All right, let's talk about a few of these Week 8 games, shall we? We'll be previewing all the games, of course, here on BETDAQ NFL over the next few days, but I would like to talk about a few now quickly, starting with the Thursday night game. Carolina Panthers going on the road to face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Carolina is installed as a 5.5-point favorite on BETDAQ, 40.5 the total in this game. Panthers picking up some momentum. They've won 3 out of their last 4. Their defense is playing extremely well. They're second in the NFL in points allowed, third in yards allowed, one of the best defenses in the NFL right now, facing a Tampa Bay offense that, other than Jacksonville, is the worst offense in the NFL. Tampa next to last, 31st in both yards per game and points per game. Only Jacksonville is worse in both categories. Tampa starting a rookie quarterback, Mike Glennon, who has looked very much like a rookie over these last couple of weeks since he's been put into the lineup. So you can understand why a lot of bettors are leaning towards the Panthers here, and this line has seen some movement out in Las Vegas. Carolina opened as a 4.5-point favorite out in Vegas. That line is now 6.5 most places around Vegas. Again, it is Carolina minus 5.5 on BETDAQ, and Carolina minus 5.5 can be had at 192 right now. So if you do like the Panthers, BETDAQ a good place to place that bet. My only concern here, from a Panthers bettor's perspective, would be the play of that Carolina offense on the road against Tampa Bay. The Bucs have been playing really good defense this year. The free agent additions in the offseason, Darrelle Revis, Deshaun Goldson, they've really paid dividends. That was the worst secondary in the NFL last season, and they're top half of the league this year in pass defense, total defense, points allowed. Tampa playing very well on that side of the ball. And Carolina, even though in some of their wins recently they've been able to exceed 30 points, in their 3 losses, they only averaged 12 points per game. They are 29th, I believe, now in the league in pass yards per game. They've been right around the bottom of the league all year in passing offense. I mean, that's part of that is by design. There's no doubt about it. Carolina wants to run the football, and they don't have a whole lot of weapons for Cam Newton to work with at the skill position. Steve Smith is their best wide receiver, and he's getting up in years now, 34 years old. However, you can't deny the Carolina offense has struggled at times this year. They struggle to pass the ball at times. And so could this turn into an ugly, low-scoring type game where 5.5 here all of a sudden feels like a lot of points? It could. And so if somebody was going to bet on Tampa Bay, I would advise a Tampa Bay and an under bet, because I think those things sort of coincide. As we mentioned, the total 40.5. And if Tampa's going to keep this one close, I have a feeling it's going to be an ugly, low-scoring game. So if you lean towards Tampa here, it would make sense if you also lean towards the under. Let's talk about one of these Sunday games. How about the Dallas Cowboys going on the road to face the Detroit Lions? Dallas is hot now. Are we buying Dallas? Over the last few years, the Cowboys have been a tease, finishing 8-8, at least the last 2 years, maybe the last 3 years in a row. They appear to be better than that this season. Currently in first place alone in the NFC East, going on the road to face the Detroit Lions. Detroit a 3-point favorite on BETDAQ, 51 the total here. So obviously not everybody buying the Cowboys, because Detroit a favorite here despite losing at home last week to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Lions a strange team. Just when you think they're going to be good, just when you're ready to buy in, they seem to disappoint you and let you down. Last week a perfect example. After a nice road win over the Cleveland Browns, Detroit really turned it on in the second half of that game, beating Cleveland 24-0 in the second half after being down 17-7 at half. Again, they went up and laid an egg. I guess you can't fully say they laid an egg because it was a competitive game. Cincinnati kicking a field goal. Mike Nugent a 54-yard field goal to win the game 27-24. And the Bengals are a quality team themselves. But the Cowboys have seemed to be better than Cincinnati this year. I mean, Dallas playing very well on offense, and their defense really stepped up last week, shutting down the Philadelphia Eagles, holding Philadelphia to 3 points. The Eagles were top 5 in the NFL in yards per game, points per game. So one of the best offenses in the league, no question about it. Very impressive to see Dallas suffocate that defense. You know Monty Kiffin had to love that. Kiffin, of course, was USC's defensive coordinator for several years, going up against those Chip Kelly Oregon offenses, and had no success stopping Oregon at that time. But now it's a little more even. Of course, I guess USC, with the type of players they recruit, it should have been even talent-wise in those matchups with Oregon, but it always seemed like the USC defense was moving in slow motion when they faced the Ducks. But now that the talent is, I guess, more equivalent, Monty Kiffin does have some success against that Chip Kelly offense, smothering them, holding them to 3 points. But we have seen the Dallas defense play poorly this year as well. Remember just 3 weeks ago, they lost that 51-48 shootout to Denver. Certainly Detroit can do some things on offense. The Lions top 5 in the NFL in passing offense once again. Calvin Johnson still slowed by that knee injury, but he's back in the lineup now. So be keeping my eye on that game. I have an early Cowboys lean there. Something tells me Detroit's still overvalued as 3-point home favorites over the Cowboys, but maybe, I'm hesitant to jump in on the Cowboys bandwagon because they have burned me in years past. So two maybe unreliable teams, but I'll keep a close eye on that line as the week progresses. Let's talk about a couple of NFC East teams, a couple of Dallas's division rivals, that being the New York Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles. They play this weekend in Philadelphia. Eagles a 5.5-point favorite on BETDAQ, 52 the total in this game. We just mentioned the Eagles faced the Cowboys last week, were limited to 3 points. Nick Foles went out of that game with a concussion. Matt Barkley came in through 3 fourth-quarter interceptions. We're hearing that Mike Vick is going to be back for this game on Sunday, but apparently Vick's hamstring's still not 100%, so who knows? Will he be limited? Will he not be as explosive as usual? And if he's not, will the New York Giants be a good play here as 5.5-point underdogs? Now, these teams played 3 weeks ago. The Eagles won 36-21. But keep in mind, the New York Giants turned the ball over 4 times in that game. Philadelphia did not turn it over at all. Now, I know turnovers have been a problem for the Giants this season. They lead the NFL in turnovers. But they only turned it over once last week. Not coincidentally, that was their first win of the season over the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I wasn't overly impressed with the Giants in that game. If you saw it, it was an ugly game. It was a one-score game really throughout until the Giants sort of pulled away late. Josh Freeman was terrible at quarterback for Minnesota. So the Giants defense played well, but you can't tell how much of that was the Giants defense and how much of that was Josh Freeman not knowing the Minnesota offense or Josh Freeman just being bad. After all, coming into that game, the Giants had the worst defense in the NFL in terms of points allowed. They were allowing over 34 points per game. We mentioned Philadelphia put up 36 on them 3 weeks ago with the help of 4 turnovers. Now, funny thing is, as bad as the Giants have been, as we said, they were 0-6 before picking up their first win on Monday night. They're now 1-6. If they win this game, if they can beat the Philadelphia Eagles, and they have an excellent chance to win the game. I don't think anybody would be too surprised if the Giants went into Philadelphia and picked up a win, especially after what we saw out of the Eagles last week. And remember, the Eagles defense, they don't have a good defense themselves. Their defense hasn't been quite as bad as the Giants statistically this season, but it's been in the same neighborhood. So if the Giants were able to go in and pick up a win in Philadelphia, and if the Dallas Cowboys lose on the road to Detroit, and Detroit is favored in that game, as we mentioned, the Lions are 3-point favorite. So people expect the Cowboys to lose that game. If that happens, the Giants only 2 games back of first in the loss column in the NFC East. As hard as it is to believe, it's not over yet for the New York Giants. They're still in it. If they can pull out a win here, because the NFC East has no dominant teams this season, that division very much up for grabs. Wouldn't be surprised if 8-8 even won the division. I would be surprised if one of these teams finished much better than 9-7, unless, as we said, unless Dallas can get it going. So the New York Giants, they're not dead yet. Can they pick up a win on the road in Philadelphia on Sunday? As we mentioned, they are 5.5-point underdogs. The total there, 52, that feels a little low for 2 offenses that can score points. No question about it. The New York Giants, the one thing they've been still doing well this year is passing the football. They're still top 10 in the NFL in pass yards per game. And as we mentioned, until last week, the Philly offense had been excellent this season. But, we said the same thing about the Philadelphia-Dallas game last week, thought that total might be a little low. We held off, and it's a good thing we did because it came in way under the total. So maybe defense is starting to figure out Chip Kelly's offense a little bit. We'll see more on Sunday. Again, 52 the total in that game. I want to move on and talk about another game now, the London game, the second and final London game of the 2013 season. The San Francisco 49ers facing the Jacksonville Jaguars. San Francisco a 17-point favorite, 40.5 the total on BETDAQ. Now listen, Jacksonville has been an absolute money machine for me this year. I hope you've been agreeing with me, following me on some of these plays. Since the beginning of the season, since the Week 1 game against Kansas City, I have said that people just don't have an understanding of how bad the Jacksonville Jaguars really are. I feel like I'm at an advantage in that regard because I do live here in Jacksonville in Northeast Florida. We're broadcasting right now from Jacksonville Beach. And so I'm inundated with Jaguars talk. You can't help but see all the preseason games. Every day, you get in your car and you hear it talked about on the radio. Coming into the season, despite all the positivity around Jacksonville, and there was a lot of positivity, it wasn't hard to see this team for what it was, a 2-14 team that really let go of some of their better players. I mean, you see guys like Darryl Smith right now, who's playing well in Baltimore. Eugene Monroe, who just let go of 2 or 3 weeks ago for draft picks. And I know they need draft picks to build in Jacksonville, but Monroe was their best offensive lineman. So, I mean, some of their best players from the past couple of seasons, Derek Cox, even though he couldn't stay healthy, was probably their best cornerback. They let him go. DeJuan Landry, they let him go. Coming into the season, they were going to be starting 2 rookies in the secondary. One of those rookies, Dwayne Gratz, has been injured, so he hasn't been starting. But anyway, the writing was on the wall. The Jags were going to be terrible this year. They did not address their quarterback situation. They did not spend money on the roster. They entered the season over $20 million under the salary cap. However, not even I thought they were going to be worse than last year, worse than 2-14. I did think they were going to be a great team to fade early in the season, starting with Kansas City. Boy, were we right about that. Turns out, incredibly, the Jags are worse than last year, much worse. At 0-7, this is one of the worst teams in NFL history by any measure. They're now only the second team in league history to lose their first 7 games by double digits, joining the 1984 Houston Oilers. Their minus 149 point differential through 7 games is 4th worst in NFL history through 7 games of a season. I mean, the only team we've ever seen never win a game has been the Detroit Lions of a few years ago, Lions finishing 0-16. But that Detroit team was in a lot of games. They actually had a chance to win a few games. This Jags team clearly worse. And we say it week in and week out. The 1 week we shied away from the Jaguars here on BETDAQ NFL was when they were getting so many points against the Denver Broncos. We just thought a 26.5 point spread was a little bit unreasonable. We did not recommend a Jags bet. We just said that 26.5 might be unreasonable, might want to stay away from the game. Every other week we have recommended going against the Jags. And quite frankly, you always hesitate going to the well one too many times because you know that odds makers eventually catch up to all teams. But how do you not lean towards San Francisco as a 17-point favorite here in Jacksonville? Listen, the 49ers are going to have a double-digit halftime lead. Whatever the first half line is going to be in this game, BETDAQ usually releases that line maybe Sunday morning, closer to the weekend, either Saturday or Sunday morning. You will want to check back. I mean, if the first half line is less than 10, you'd have to like San Francisco in the first half. Again, the only reason to like the Jags in any of these games when they're getting a number like this, 17 here against San Francisco, they were 20-point underdogs against Seattle. We mentioned the 26.5 point number against Denver. The only argument you can really ever make for the Jags is, well, it's such a big number that maybe in the second half, teams will start pulling starters, letting off the gas. Jags will score some cheap late points and come in there with a backdoor cover. That argument it always exists, and because these numbers are just cartoonishly big, there will always be people jumping on the Jags, making that argument. But we saw in the Seattle game, the Seahawks pulled their starters in the third quarter. Russell Wilson standing on the sidelines in the third quarter. They were up 31-0. The Jags did score some meaningless garbage time points, 17 of them to be exact, when Seattle had pulled some of their defensive starters, and it still didn't matter. Of course, Seahawks still covered, winning that game 45-17. So, look, it's going to be hard to not recommend a 49ers bet. It's going to be hard for me not to get involved in this game and back San Francisco because Jacksonville's been such a money tree, and it seems like people still haven't caught on. I mean, last week, one of our best bets, the San Diego Chargers, and I watched all week as the line moved at sportsbooks around the world in the Jags' favor. San Diego opening as a 9.5 point favorite here on BETDAQ and elsewhere. By the time that line closed, BETDAQ had put up a 7.5 point market. It was 7 flat all over Vegas. I'm hearing all these so-called experts pick Jacksonville for an outright upset. I'm going on Twitter on Sunday morning and seeing these guys saying sharp money today on the Jaguars. And I'm saying, what do these people know that I don't know? The answer is nothing. These people do not know anything I don't know. I know more about the Jaguars than these people know, I have to say. And the vast majority of these people who are backing the Jaguars, who were backing them last week, are doing it entirely based on the situation. The Chargers were coming off a short week traveling across the country. The Jags just had their best performance of the season in a 16-point loss to Denver. Coming home, a lot of people thought it was a great situation for the Jags, getting more than 7 points at home. As I said last week, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, most of those people have not seen the Jaguars play. The Jaguars are only shown in their local television area and the opponent's television area. Of course, many people have NFL Sunday Ticket. Not many of those people choose to watch the Jacksonville Jaguars play on Sunday, understandably. I've watched the Jags many times this season with people who are watching them for the first time. And nearly every time, at some point in the game, there's sort of an aha moment. The people sort of turn at you and laugh and shrug their shoulders, and they say, oh, I see now, I understand. So I advise you, if you're going to bet on Jacksonville this year, or if you're going to be involved in Jacksonville games this year, please watch them play. A prime opportunity this week in London. Watch this game. Look at this team. Understand what we're talking about here. Understand why we keep on recommending opposing teams as double-digit favorites against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and those teams cover on a weekly basis. The Jags 1-6 against the spread that only cover this year. That 16-point loss to Denver. A game, by the way, if they hadn't returned an interception for a touchdown, which an extremely rare thing facing Peyton Manning, and it was Paul Posluszny's first career pick six, so it was a rare play all around. If they hadn't done that, they'd have lost by 26. It would have been right around there. Oh, I guess my math's a little off. Hey, I'm not a math major here. I guess they'd have lost by 23. You get my point. It's not like that was a tremendously easy cover, even though it was the Jags' best game of the season. So hard not to lean towards San Francisco minus 17 out here in London. Niners have been playing very well since they have returned to the power running game. That is the focus of their offense now once again. Jacksonville, last in the NFL in rushing defense. I have heard the weather is supposed to be ugly this week in London, so we'll see. If it's nasty in Wembley, if the field gets all torn up and this turns into a real low-scoring game. We see the total is 40.5, so we do expect this to be a low-scoring game. But if this turns into a 17-0 like type game, 17-3 type game, of course, at 17-0 it would be a push. At 17-3, the Jags would barely slide in there with a cover. You get my drift. It's tough to make an argument for the Jags here. If you bet on the Jags, you better be hoping for some adverse weather conditions. You better be hoping that the 49ers just run the ball and try to play keep away and keep the score down. Those type of things are the only way I can see Jacksonville staying within 17 in this game. San Francisco will win the game and will probably cover. Final game I'd like to discuss here quickly, the Sunday night game. Green Bay Packers going on the road to face their division rival Minnesota Vikings. Packers installed as a 10-point favorite on BETDAQ, 46.5 the total in this game. Now, why this game is so interesting to me is because the Minnesota Vikings are starting Josh Freeman once again, and this is just very puzzling. If you saw the Monday night game, and I know a lot of people didn't, especially a lot of people, if you're listening to us from Europe, a lot of you might not have seen it because I know it's in the middle of the night over there, but it was such an ugly performance Josh Freeman put forth against the New York Giants, the winless Giants who were allowing more points than any team in the NFL at that time. Freeman, I believe he threw for 190 yards, attempted 52 or 53 passes. First quarterback in, I believe, 6 years to attempt 50 passes or more and fail to throw and throw for less than 200 yards. His 37% completion rate was the second fewest for a quarterback with 50 more completions in the last 10 years, something like that. It goes on. We detailed it here on our Good, the Bad, and the Ugly post here on BETDAQ NFL. So if you want to know the details, check it out. I think he's only the second quarterback in NFL history to have a game, to make his debut with a team and have 30 incompletions. I mean, you can go on down the line. It was a brutal, brutal performance from Josh Freeman. Now, I guess all the blame can't go on Freeman because it was clearly a scaled-down offense, and I wasn't the only one who said that. The commentators were saying that. Anybody who was watching the game, it was obvious. There wasn't a whole lot of pre-snap motion. A lot of the things that the Vikings have done in the passing game this season with Christian Ponder and Matt Castle, we didn't see. We didn't see on Monday night. Now, curiously, they didn't hand the ball to Adrian Peterson a whole lot either. Peterson didn't have a whole lot of success when he did get the ball, but that game was close throughout, a one-score game throughout despite Minnesota's offensive struggles. So it was very unusual to see their game plan on offense, throwing it over 50 times, even though some of the pass plays they were running, as John Gruden pointed out doing the analysis, were very basic, and the Giants seemed to have those plays pretty well snuffed out, yet they went back to those plays throughout the game multiple times with no success. Now, Green Bay coming in is banged up on offense. Last week, without both their starting wide receivers, and Jermichael Finley, their tight end, went out last week with that scary neck injury. So the Packers aren't going to be themselves on offense, but Minnesota, one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. And again, with Josh Freeman starting quarterback for the Vikings, I know laying a double-digit number on the road against a division rival. I mean, there's a bunch of no-nos there. A lot of people don't like to lay double-digit numbers in the NFL, period. A lot of people especially don't like that to do that on the road, especially not against a division rival, a team that knows you intimately because you play twice a year. However, after seeing the Minnesota Vikings on Monday night, after seeing Josh Freeman and just how ugly that was, boy, going to be tough to shy away from the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are not the New York Giants. They are a good team, as we saw again last week when they handled the Cleveland Browns easily at home. Again, going to be tough for me not to lean towards Green Bay, -10 on the road in Minnesota. But I don't know. We'll think about that over the next couple of days. Again, it is early here in the week. We'll be previewing all these games here on BETDAQ NFL over the next few days, so we do hope you check back with us. Until then, for BETDAQ NFL, I'm John Arnette.